lung cancer, stage 4, small cell, the most aggressive form. 48 hours before surgery to put in a chemo port and a pacemaker. And there was no way for me to get back to the US in time to be with my mom before her surgery. It was July 2022. I was in Mozambique leading an executive team retreat. I was leading an international nonprofit and carrying the weight of a lot of responsibility. In 3 days, we had 35 leaders flying in from 17 countries for a critical week-long retreat where we would shape the next decade of our organization. It was our first global gathering since COVID began, and stakes were high. So there I was, sweating in Mozambique, facing a decision that felt impossible. I should stay. I should lead. I should honor the massive investment. I should be strong. I should not disappoint. But underneath the weight of all of those shoulds, there was one quiet truth. I wanted to be with my mom. That collision crystallized a question for me that I couldn't ignore, a question that many of us never pause to ask before midlife. Am I living my life by design or by default? Many of the shoulds you follow are not yours, yet they're emotionally sticky and socially reinforced. With time, they become your own thoughts, your own voice, your own truth. That was when I felt it, the weight of my shoulds. But my shoulds didn't start in Mozambique. I had been collecting them and carrying them with me since I was a little girl. I grew up playing on my grandparents' farm, the only girl among 6 grandkids. I was wild. I ran, I built forts in the hayloft, I scaled the silo and the barn ledge. I swung like a monkey from the barn door on the rope, back and forth. I reveled in the risk of falling. I beat the boys at nearly every game we invented. I was free. And yet, from an early age, there was a difference between what was alive in me versus what was expected from me. My grandmother believed I should not be out in the barn with the boys. My hair would get tangled, my clothes would get dirty. I should stay inside. I should be quiet. I should look pretty. But I did not want to be inside the house, or quiet, or clean. That is where my relationship with shoulds began, in small, everyday moments where I learned to hand over pieces of myself for approval and belonging. I quieted my sneezes. I raised my hand a little less in class. I wore the dreaded Easter dress. Learned to shrink parts of myself for others. Traded authenticity for acceptance. That early tension between others' expectations and what was alive in me didn't stay in childhood. Over time, the expectations that I picked up from family and society started to pile up. They became a heavy sack of shoulds. Not a little backpack, but a full-on, drag it through the airport sack, stuffed with other people's expectations, judgments, and fears that I had made my own. I dragged that sack everywhere, through college, through Peace Corps, through marriage, through motherhood, through my 25-year career in global development, through every decision that kept me performing for approval versus living for joy. Breastfeeding in the office at 10 p.m. Flying to Jordan when my firstborn was just 4 months old. Preparing for a board meeting from my teenage daughter's hospital room. Flying to Cambodia 9 days after having my appendix removed. Being supermom while also being the sole breadwinner. Staying in a destructive marriage while clinging to a contract I had made with myself at 13, that I would never get divorced like my parents. You don't follow shoulds because you believe in them. You follow them because they've been repeated, rewarded, and absorbed until they feel like truth. That's what makes shoulds so dangerous. They stop feeling optional, and they start feeling like the price of admission. By midlife, my sack was so heavy, it tore open. And as I looked at the shoulds strewn across my life, I paused, I stopped, and I finally asked, why am I carrying them at all? There's a reason that these questions get louder in midlife. The U-curve of happiness shows that life satisfaction or happiness often declines in midlife before rising again later. Research shows that this dip can be a season when responsibilities pile up, caregiving gets heavier, and career pressure intensifies. It can be a time when you begin to see that the earlier scripts no longer fit. Adult development research shows that events like divorce, widowhood, serious illness, job loss, or parental death can force people to rebuild their identities. These events interrupt automatic living, and they create a reflective gap where you might ask, who am I now? What matters to me? And what expectations have I inherited? That resonates with my experience. For me, midlife brought both reflection and rupture. It was less a crisis and more a reckoning. A should can start as somebody else's rule or expectation. It's often a time when old scripts stop working. Responsibilities shift, roles change, bodies change, priorities evolve. The life that once felt stable can suddenly feel off, almost as if it's not yours. And that does not mean that something is wrong. It may mean you outgrew the identity you built to survive. It may mean the script no longer fits because it wasn't yours. Social science explains why a should can feel so heavy. You carry two things at once: your own worry and the imagined judgment of other people. Midlife can be a season where you stop living for applause or approval, and you start living for what is true. The events that destabilize midlife can also free us. The decision to go home to be with my mom should have been obvious. But with all the shoulds I was dragging around, it wasn't. I stayed in Mozambique for the week-long global retreat. I returned to the US on a Tuesday, arrived at my mom's late on Wednesday. On Thursday, we headed to her oncology appointment to set her schedule for chemotherapy. Her odds were 1 to 2 years with chemo. At that appointment, my mom let go of a big should. She decided to forego treatment. She passed away on Tuesday, just 5 days later. It happened so fast, and it made me realize how expensive shoulds can be, time that I'd never get back. And her courage to let go made me realize how important it is to unpack my sack of shoulds, to begin living a life that I love today, not next month or next year, but today. I chose to step away from my marriage, and I began to discover who I am as an adult woman and a mom when I'm no longer performing to keep everything intact. When USAID was demolished and the global development sector I spent 25 years in imploded, I left my job. I spent 3 weeks in the Amazon rainforest living with an indigenous community where I reminded myself what matters most. I started my own social impact coaching business. I decoupled my identity from my career, and I began to design a life that I love living without sacrificing my health, my joy, or my time with my family. And that's what the research means in real life. Life interrupts the script, and sometimes that interruption can be the first honest invitation to ask what is actually yours. The good news is you don't have to wait until midlife. The next time you hear yourself say, "I should," pause and ask, is this mine? Is it my belief or someone else's? Is it a fear? A should can often start as somebody's rule or a societal expectation, like, you should keep the peace. You should be the strong one. You should not disappoint your family. You should put everybody else first. A should can also be tied to fear, self-doubt, or a deep feeling of not being enough. A should can survive for years, not because it is right, but because it has been protected by approval, belonging, or the fear of disappointing others. Research on authenticity tells us that when our decisions are most aligned with our true self and not just what we've been taught to do, we are most satisfied. When we pause and ask, is this mine? We're not just checking a preference. We're checking whether our life is still connected to our true self. Once you see that, you can shift the should. Not, I should do this, but I want to do this, or I choose to do this. Or my favorite, I'm not doing this at all. That shift is powerful because now you're writing your own script. I'm not saying that life gets easy when you stop obeying shoulds. It doesn't. Living by design takes courage and intention. It can be hard to disappoint people. It can be scary to stop performing. It can be uncomfortable to let go of identities that once made you feel safe or successful. But living by default costs more. Behavioral science calls this the default effect, that people often follow a familiar path because living by default can feel safer in the moment. But over time, it quietly costs you clarity, energy, and your sense of self. So here's my invitation to you. Unpack your sack of shoulds. Name one should you're hauling around. The one about your job, the one about your relationship, the one about your role in the family, the one about who you think you have to be in order to belong. Your life can shift with one honest question. Ask yourself, is this mine? If it's yours, keep it. If it came from fear or someone else, let it go. Because you do not have to live your life by default. You can design a life that is actually yours.